Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Council of Fans podcast, where today we have a really lovely guest joining us, and that is Nerd of the Rings. Hello, my friend.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
It's hopefully it's going to be a blast, and of course, is it fine just in today's video just referring to you as Matt? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, as you can tell from the side, half the co-hosts have just disappeared. But joining us today, we still have Ken. Hello, my friend.
Hi.
And we also have TolkienTube.
Hey, it's great to be here.
And of course, TolkienTube and Nerd of the Rings channels will both be in the description below. Indeed. And TolkienTube, this is your 2-minute warning to get up a picture of that Russell Crowe picture, if you know what I'm on about. Okay, but
yeah.
And the reason that is it will make sense second, because I think an interesting thing Ken mentioned was that as of right now we have a pretty decent cast, but Nerd of the Rings is no one's there really that's, you know, you go on a billboard and you see the Lord of the Rings on Prime, whatever the title is, and then that star factor. Do you think there's still a chance that we could see one, or do you think Amazon will continue this way?
Yeah, I've had some conversations with other fans who are convinced that there's like some secret big star that Amazon is hiding. I don't really buy into that, and I honestly kind of prefer that there's not. Like was just said a few minutes ago, the fact that these are all, you know, I won't go as far as to say unknown, but relatively unknown. Like your average person who like goes to the movies, you know, maybe once or twice, once a month or once every couple months, you know, they're not going to recognize pretty much anybody from this cast, which I love. That's kind of how it was with Lord of the Rings, at least for me. You know, I'd seen Ian McKellen, I think, in X-Men, and that was about it. And I can't remember if Hugo Weaving was in Matrix. I can't remember which one came out first. Maybe Matrix came out first, but either way, I didn't recognize him from Matrix. So, but they were, you know, you don't like. I know there's rumors about Russell Crowe and like, you know, some other big names, and I actually think it worked out better for Lord of the Rings that they didn't. You know, the Peter Jackson films, like the big names that they had talked about back in the day, didn't work out, like Sean Connery, because it allows you to picture these people as just their character. You know, if I'm watching a Russell Crowe movie, most of the time I'm like, oh yeah, that's Russell Crowe. You know, maybe with the exception of Maximus and Gladiator, because that was his first big one. You know, I see the actor. You know, you're not going to see a Tom Cruise movie and not think he's not going to like dissolve into the character.
Yeah.
You know, I like that.
Yeah, I think Russell Crowe in Robin Hood as well. I'm not sure if you've seen that. When I watched that movie, I couldn't see Robin Hood. I just saw this maybe aging, maybe a bit more weight Russell Crowe playing this 20 years younger character. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, I think anything you see Russell Crowe in that isn't like current day, you're gonna think like, oh, it's Gladiator, you know. So yeah, I think there's a very I think it's a smart play because it might be a very slight benefit, a slight edge, but it kind of like gives these actors like a little bit of a little bit of help in embodying these characters for people, because we don't know them as something else that's more famous than Lord of the Rings.
Indeed. And I know you wanted to go next.
Yeah, I like the idea of, as much as I do like the idea of a cast based on character actors, you know, a lot of movies and TV shows have successfully planted like maybe a star or two into such a cast without it piercing the illusion too much. Because the Lord of the Rings movies, they had, I suppose, their big star would be Liv Tyler, actually. that was a cast member that New Line specific. I mean, it was Peter Jackson's idea, but once he brought it up, New Line were like, "Oh yeah, sure, get it," because I think he was like really big in Japan of all places at the time. You know, the idea of having a star in a big production is something that goes way back. And there are lots of movies, like you watch Lawrence of Arabia and you don't look at Anthony Quinn, who was their big American star, and it doesn't burst the illusion really. Or Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now. I don't think it really hurts the movie in any way. On the contrary, it's a masterpiece. But and you know, it's the same like. So I do like the idea, the showmanship of having a big star in there. I do think it could be that there's somebody that's possibly in a small role. It's not a very big commitment. It's not like they're hiding someone who is there constantly throughout this long period. But sure, something small. I could see that happening. I'm not actually sure that it's actually happening, but I can see it happening.
Yeah, and I was thinking that if you're going down your route and having maybe an actor, a really well-established actor, probably maybe a bit older, play a role in the show, I think maybe could Kurdan be a good, just a good.
Oh yeah, sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Your mind would turn, of course, towards any number. Like you would think, like I think at the time, around the time when the Russell Crowe rumor was fairly active. By the way, I just saw that he's busy directing a movie. But around the time that rumor was very active, one of the things that one of the ideas that was thrown around was that he would be Durin. But we have a cast member who is, you know, like has Durin written all over him, which would be Peter Mullen. I mean, that's so obvious. If you know anything about Peter Mullen's filmography, especially if you know his voice, really thick Scottish accent, really deep. Gravelly, you just know that that's what they've cast him for, and he has read for Balin previously, so it makes sense. But yeah, Círdan, sure, something like that sort of thing.
I think I'm more with Matt on this issue. I don't really think that you can. I mean, maybe you can, but it's definitely harder to look at a character that, say, The Rock is playing and see the character rather than The Rock. And granted, you know, if they do get a more popular actor, it's probably not going to be someone like The Rock or Tom Cruise or maybe even Russell Crowe. It'll be an actor that's better known than most of the actors that they've hired so far, but still not, you know, a film icon like Tom Cruise. But either way, I just think it kind of ruins the immersion. And I know you could take the route that Star Wars did, which was mask up a really famous actor, Daniel Craig. Granted, he's not like, you know, Tom Cruise, but he's still pretty popular. He's a good actor. And what Star Wars did, they put him in a stormtrooper costume, and he said a few lines, but you couldn't really tell he was who he was. So I feel like I think that was a bit of a waste, to be honest.
Yeah,
I just think keeping big actors out of it is fine by me, to be honest.
I think in one Star Wars movie, Anthony Daniels appears in the flesh, and you don't see his face anywhere, so you don't go, oh, C-3PO. So it isn't distracting in that way, and you could do something like that with an orc or something, sure.
But I feel like if you're shoving them into the story like that, what's the point to begin with? I mean, sure, you can say, oh, we've got an actor in here that's really big and famous, but people aren't going to come to see that actor when it's already got the Lord of the Rings to make people want to watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, the kind of the examples you gave there are more, you know, cameos where someone, you know, like Daniel Craig, like it was just a cool, like, hey, you want to show up for a couple hours and be in Star Wars, you know?
That's true, yeah.
Like no one was going to see Star Wars because Daniel Craig was in it or whatever, but I could see, you know, in some of my other conversations, you know, they've talked about the possibility, like, well, maybe they get a star, you know, kind of like Game of Thrones did to get Sean Bean, and then he's only around for a season or for a limited time, but it's to get people in the door kind of thing. I could see, for the Russell Crowe example, because that was a big rumor at the time anyway. Pretty sure he's not in it, but, if you did cast someone like Russell Crowe, I could see him being, a Numenorian king who gets killed off, or the timeline progresses to where he dies off or something after a set period of time, something like that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking the interesting thing is that, now back to Amazon in a sense, is when would they release it? How would they release it? Because really, maybe we of course it's 2 weeks later. Maybe Amazon have maybe released it on the day of wrap, and they've done a photo. I don't know. Maybe let's say Daniel Craig is I don't know, Annatar or something. That'd be really weird actually. That's coming to my head. Don't know why I've said that, but
yeah. Daniel Craig did read for the role of Boromir.
Yeah, but I'm sure everyone's read for Lord of the Rings at this point. Okay.
Yeah, sure, but just it's a cool thing. Yeah.
But and I was thinking another interesting who would Dwayne Johnson play if he was in Lord of the Rings? I was thinking that someone mentioned that as well. I think talking to you.
Well, I don't really know where to go with that, to be honest.
Yeah, I know the way.
I think him, Tom Cruise, and the likes that are just so popular, you can only see the actor, not the character. They shouldn't be in it at all.
But there is also the other issue, which is, look at this cast. They're almost all Brits, which is exactly the thing that they did in the movies as well. The cast is mostly from the British Commonwealth and maybe Ireland as well.
Let's go.
And the occasional American doing a British accent. You wouldn't get Tom Cruise to do an English accent.
Yeah, the less Americans the better. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a British story.
Well, and they've also got a few New Zealanders as well in the cast.
Yeah, British Commonwealth, New Zealand. Sure.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking as well, but I think around actors around that, we've pretty much talked about it. We're not sure if well, for my opinion, for what it's worth, I would be with Matt as well. Even though I do understand that you would maybe want to see maybe someone, but for the sake of it, if I would like to see if they're just too distracting, I think is the main thing with this. It is too distracting. And maybe someone said the Sean Bean Game of Thrones idea around that, and that maybe Celebrimbor, maybe that would have been a good example to use. Just I don't know, just some. Yeah, who would actually want to take the role? This spoiler alert: take the role of Celebrimbor. When he gets put on that banner. Do you think they'll use the actual actor for that, or they'll just use when he just hung around in the orc armies, or use a stunt double? Because with nudity and stuff like that, and a lot of maybe more diehard fans said, "Oh yeah, but that's the case where nudity could work with having like Celebrimbor on this stake. He's just had a Region fall, or probably Gwythaim Dane. All his friends are just dead, and it's like." And wait, this is another interesting. Do you think that could be a season finale, Matt?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, like, not knowing when the show's picking up. But kind of my prediction, I guess, is that season 1 ends with at least the reveal that Annatar is Sauron, and I think a pretty compelling ending of the season would be right after Celebrimbor's death and the fall of Eregion. You get that great cliffhanger where Sauron's actually victorious and he reclaims a lot of the rings, not the Elven Three, obviously. But then that leaves a big, open question, especially for people who aren't familiar with the lore, and even those that are. A lot of this is like, well, how are they going to portray this? But yeah, then that opens up season 2 for them to fight back against Sauron as he tries to take over the rest of Eriador.
And I think last time we had a conversation like this with a guest Ken maybe might have scared off the last one, so I don't Ken, unless you want to respectfully just if you want to respond, because Matt, in your
I'll just say that I wasn't angry. I was passionate. That's
and yeah, you were passionate. Yeah, you were passionate. So Matt, do you think we will see the downfall of Numenor on the show and the Akalabeth in the later parts?
Yeah, definitely. I think you know, a lot of it will depend on how the show does, I'm sure. But yeah, the Fallen Numenor, I think that's something that, you know, is on everybody's list for things that the show that they want to see depicted.
Except one person.
Honestly,
except one person. Yeah, continue.
I think it's something that that they need to show. Like I said, I think, you know, unless they're majorly tweaking the timeline, and like somehow making the fall of Numenor to coincide at around the same time as Celebrimbor's demise, I could see that. I hope they don't do that because they're separated by so much time in the actual story. But you know, I'm thinking like first season. I've put way too much thought into this as I'm like driving and stuff. I think this is the stuff I think about. Is, you know, season 1 kind of like sets up the world and ends with Sauron overthrowing Eregion, and then season 2 is about fighting back against Sauron, and then season 3 is Sauron and Numenor. I don't know if they'll wait that long to show us Sauron and Numenor till season 3, but
yeah, I think
yeah.
John D. Ruddy mentioned when he was on, he said he had because he's a historian and does a lot of stuff like around this YouTube videos as well. I really liked, which could fix what you're saying as well, is that, you know, 3200 second age, Sauron gets captured, gets sent to Numenor, and then there begins the Akalabeth. Maybe at the end of season 3 you push that back to around 1800 the second age, and that's the only real time compression. Then when you go into season 4, you end of season 3 finale, Sauron getting captured by the Numenorians willingly, of course. Then going into season 4, that just puts it all together. Then you start with Sauron in Numenor, and then you got 2 seasons to do that and the Last Alliance. Do you think that could be a good way to maybe bridge that gap? And of course there's a time jump, but it still works lore wise as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously Peter Jackson's films compress 17 years out of the equation between Bilbo leaving the ring to Frodo and Frodo ultimately like setting out from the Shire. You know, that's a 17-year period in the books, whereas in the films it seems like it's a week later or something, you know. So yeah, a compression of time. Like, I'm not necessarily worried about, you know, them compressing time like that, and even if it's you know, a flash forward kind of thing, because we know, you know, there's a time difference between when Sauron is defeated in Eriador and then when he gets captured by the Numenorians. So I would anticipate that time gets compressed or you know, glossed over. I don't think we'll see Sauron and Numenor for 2 full seasons because you know, and I feel like with series, you've got to have something big. You know, they almost always, like, season finales are big events. And so that's why, you know, when I start thinking about how 5 seasons will plan out, I kind of go by the big tentpole events in the story. So that's why I go to Fall of Eregion, and the reveal of Sauron in season 1, and the War of Sauron and the Elves season 2, and then Fall of Numenor maybe season 3, and then I don't know. It's tricky. Yeah.
I think that's how most people would do it. And I know, Ken, I know you want to respond. I will let you. And I think me and Talkative will be back up just in case. But yeah, take it away, Ken. I know I don't want to go into discussion too much that in the sense because we've had it before. But yeah, just quickly.
Yeah, sure, very quickly. I think the length of the time jump is completely immaterial. Because the fact of the matter is that there is a time jump, and no matter how much you compress it, you have different characters in the Rings of Power storyline, and completely different characters in the Excalibur storyline. And it's not a good idea to overhaul a large part of. You want a show that has a continuum of cast from beginning to end. Of course, some of them will die in battle and that sort of thing, but you don't want to suddenly between episodes or even between seasons to go, well, all of these characters and their children and grandchildren have all died, and here are new characters that take their place in the narrative. And also, like, the Ring story is very elf-centric, the Numenor story later on is obviously human-centric. It's a very weird thing to try and put together into one show. Seeing how the show is projected to be 5 seasons long plus a spin-off, my thinking is that the most natural thing to do would be to do one show on one event and a completely separate show on the other. So yeah.
And
I think that's what they're doing. That's it's not just my. I think that is what they're doing.
Yeah, you think remember we've had. You think Ken thinks it. We don't know for sure if they will. And
we don't know. We don't.
And just in between this, as if you can all see on chat, this is what I was referencing to earlier. I'm not sure Matthew can see it, but this is the most recent photo of Russell Crowe looking like. Do you think? I think we said this to Dan before for Voice of Geekdom. That do you think an elf a chance? Are you playing an elf? Any chance? Matt's just disappeared.
Yeah, I highly doubt he doesn't look like he has the elf physique at the moment.
No.
And I'm rather passionate about this, but I think he's also a little bit too old. I think the average age for an elf is something like 30, and he's, well, a lot older than 30.
Yeah,
he's an older-looking actor.
Yeah, if Russell Crowe were to be in the show, my money would be on a Numenorian king. That's what I've always thought.
Definitely.
Sure.
Yeah, and
could be a dwarf, I think, but
yeah, but again, that part is taken.
We've got the Scottish guy that everybody needs to be a dwarf, a Scottish guy. We've got him.
Well, keep in mind, I mean, the show's gonna cover probably at least 1,000 years of the Second Age, so there can be multiple Dwarven kings, and maybe he could also be Narvi, but I guess all that's a little bit irrelevant because he's not in the series.
Like I said, I just read that he's busy directing again, so he's got other things on his mind.
I think we've spoken enough about Russell Crowe in this podcast.
Sure.
So I think we'll get away from that for a bit. And I was thinking, one thing you didn't mention there was character roles. Who's playing who? I think that would be an interesting thing. I know, Ken, you have done a lot of work on who's going who, but would you like to see like an official announcement around that?
Yeah, sure. Beyond just even, you can do it in a way that's more tactile than just names. Just release, like pictures of Robert Aramayo in the kind of Elrond getup. It wouldn't blow up the internet. It's not that huge, but it certainly will get people. It will grab people's attention, I think, and the same with other characters as well. Again, Peter Mullen as Durin, like in the dwarf makeup. Sure, that sort of stuff will get people talking, shall we say?
Yeah.
But I don't think we can expect to see that before the PR cycle starts. I mean, it's not impossible,
maybe glimpses.
It's feeling like pretty
silhouette or something, but sure.
Yeah, but like actual, an actor in his or her costume.
I will say, like, the thing that Amazon really has going for it is, this thing is ready to explode on social media.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Like rumors and stuff have been trending. You know, anytime like a decent rumor that even is proven completely false. You know, if it's Lord of the Rings and like people start jump on it, like you know, there's definitely going to be a hype train for this show when it does start releasing stuff.
Yeah, and it depends on what type of marketing you're going to do. Is it going to be build up? I know they did say it was build up marketing, like in that space of 2 or 3 months, maybe. Because I think a good way to do this is look at Matt, have you been following the Wheel of Time announcements that much, by any chance? Because I know
I haven't. No, I haven't. I tried to get into the books and I just couldn't do it. Like they were just. I'm a big audiobook guy, so a lot of it depends on how good the audiobooks are, whether I finish it, and my eyes just kind of glazed over. Like it was just not my cup of tea, I guess, with the delivery of the audiobook. So I just kind of, my eyes glossed over and like phrases began to run together and stuff. So yeah, I've not kept up on that with all.
What would you say if Andy Serkis did the audiobook for the Wheel of Time? Would you give it another chance?
I would totally give it another chance. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know, I actually haven't know about Hen, but I know Gallifreyan, your favourite, I think, character going into the show is Celebrimbor. And Hen, I'll go into yours in a second. Mine personally is Gilgalad. And I think you see an elven theme here. So Matt, what character are you most excited to see adapted?
Oh. I'd say okay, so I'll give a 2-part answer. So the one I'm most curious to see adapted would be Sauron and / Annatar, because I feel like a lot could rest on him, and if that isn't done well, it could be really bad for the show. Yeah, I feel like that might be one of the most important ones for them to get right in, you know, dialogue, how they show him and everything. Elrond is definitely up there for me in terms of what they do with this story, because I feel like he's got some of the most compelling story that's not necessarily directly spelled out in, you know, the appendices and unfinished tales. But if you just think about what he's going through at that time, you know, his brother is obviously the first king of Numenor. He's a very, you know, by elven terms, he is very young at the at the beginning of the Second Age. So him kind of like becoming the elf that we know later. And then aside from that, Celebrimbor is one that I'm very anxious to see. The Forger of the Rings, you know, we obviously got a version of him with the lore, you know, not exactly on point, but it was still a fun version of the character in Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's, the relationship between him and Sauron's got a lot of potential for, you know, them being friends, and then for Sauron to turn on him, and then, you know, that his last stand could be a really cool, epic moment in the series.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Elrond, because I've actually got, I'm not sure compared to a lot of different people, is that I don't think, let's presume that the show is starting mid-early Second Age. In that case, let's say we are most likely going to see Forge of the Rings. So I was just thinking anyways that with Elrond, not much really happens with him. Like, for example, if Gilgalad talks to Tar Minelda, goes to meshes Numenor, Aldarion. We've got Círdan, he meets some of the Numenorians, so we have that. Then we've got Galadriel. I believe Galadriel did meet Aldarion. Then she moved some Lindon to Eregion. We don't know who founded that really. Then we've got Celebrimbor. We have him doing his stuff in Eregion, and of course we have Sauron being Annatar. But Elrond, he was I just feel like he is just the, in the sense, I know Ken, unless he's something else, that he's maybe the one that has the list going for him so far at the start of the show. I think maybe with Elrond's character, we're going to maybe see the biggest change, because I know, for example, another thing is that Celeborn, this next Tolkien didn't really go much into depth about his characters at all, so that's going to be an invention in itself of what his attitude's like, how he's like maybe to other people, what personality, etc. That's all going to have to be made up. But with Elrond, I'm not sure if you guys have different opinions on this, but I just feel like he doesn't really have anything going for him in the sense that story-wise, unless it has to be something drastically changed in order to put more into the plot, because you know he is in Lindon at the start. But yeah, anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Well,
So
I mean,
okay. We'll go down and up. So start with Nerd of the Rings, and then we'll go up. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm actually scripting a video right now on why I think Elrond is the most compelling main character for the show. And you're right. Like, he's not directly mentioned in a lot of these events, but he's there for them. And the thing with Elrond is, like I said, when he, obviously in the first stage, if they've got the rights to like do a flashback or something, you've got the traumatic childhood where, the kinslaying, and then he's raised by the attackers of the kinslaying, and pretty much never sees his parents again. His brother goes to found Numenor, and one of the biggest things that I feel like there's room to see him turn into the Elrond we see in Peter Jackson's films is, his brother decides to be a man, decides to be mortal, goes and is king of Numenor, and then Elrond would bear witness to the downfall of Numenor and how they turn their backs on the elves. They lose their island's destroyed, and then he's working side by side with the survivors in Numenor. So you've got Elendil, Anarion, and Isildur, and then for ultimately this would be at the end of the show, but then have this new hope for men, the people of his brother, and then for Isildur to ultimately fall short once again. It kind of gets him to that point where you kind of understand him a bit more, when he says men are weak, and has kind of this jaded feeling toward men that you see in the films.
Yeah.
That, and he also meets his wife in the second age as well.
Yeah.
And founds Rivendell. So there's definitely some stuff there.
And I know.
Yeah,
go on.
Especially with Rivendell, I really agree with a lot of what you said, but I think ultimately he can't really be a main character until around the year, let's see, like a little bit after like the year 1700, maybe. No, actually a little bit before that.
That's in the war, yeah.
Time of the Battle of the Guathlo. Yeah, because he doesn't really do anything at all during the Forging of the Rings. Sure, he does some stuff, but really not much that's actually worth, like making a TV show over. So I think season 2, 3, 4, 5, it would be worth having him as a main character. But early on, I think Celebrimbor and Sauron and Galadriel are going to be the focus, just because, if the rings weren't forged, then nothing else in the Second Age or even Third Age would have happened. It would have all just been pretty peaceful and fun, minus, Sauron would have tried to attack people in a different way, but that's aside from the point.
Probably in the East. Yeah.
I agree with Nerd of the Rings actually completely, because Elrond, he doesn't. It can make stuff for him to do, and I think Elrond has a huge advantage for Amazon, because he's much younger, and the actor that we strongly believe is playing Elrond, which would be Robert De Romeo, suddenly comes across as very young. And would probably play him quite young as well. And, you can play him like the everyman character. Sure, he is elf royalty in a way, very much so, but he's still kind of a young man. He's under the wing of Gil-galad. He's not terribly experienced. He's very much the everyman, and that would be very attractive for Amazon in terms of him being a main character. And I absolutely think that he is the character of the ones that we know, the ones that do survive into the movies that we know and into the books that we know. He's the one that is the most different because he is so young. And so there is much more possibility there for growth in the character very, very interesting. And the others as well, Sauron, very interesting as well. As certainly Celebrimbor, for very much the same reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've said my first part, and the purposes on this for my second part. I just like Matt said, I sometimes just think about this in your head around how the show could work. I was thinking, how do you fit Elrond into the Forging of the Rings story? And I've seen all you respond, and I was thinking that this was my second part, was maybe we know Annatar goes to Lindon, he gets rejected. But then maybe for season 1, as we know, Elrond, he's the only elven character that doesn't have much to do. Maybe his story arc for season 1 is maybe figuring out, just having a look into this Annatar to see who he really is, and maybe it's the season finale, something that is Elrond. He's on his own. Just I know we don't like Game of Thrones references, but like Ned Stark when he's looking into I think their marriage, or like who the king is or whatever. I've forgotten their names, but the same thing. So Matt, do you think this could work? Then having maybe for the earlier show we have Elrond on this little side quest on the side. You just have him seeing maybe who Annatar is. Who's this person that showed up at our kingdom and just wanted open access? Said he's an emissary of the Valar, and then my council Gil-galad, he's rejected him, and I'm like, I'm gonna go look into this guy for a bit and see what this guy's really up to, and then maybe suspense throughout the first season, and then once you go up to reveal, maybe Elrond at the same time finds out, oh, this guy is Sauron from the past. Do you think that could be a good way and maybe I've given you a new video idea to put in?
I've kind of thought about this as well, and for the last few weeks I've been thinking, I hadn't been thinking about Elrond necessarily like playing the detective or anything, but I did kind of assume that there will be some mystery around Annatar, whether it's we know that that's Sauron, but the
characters
don't. Or I think an intriguing option would be, they'd have to tweak it a little bit, but and it all depends on how they film it and everything. But if they don't necessarily show Sauron going to Lindon and they pick up with Sauron already being in a Region, and maybe the whole time we're guessing which character is Sauron in disguise, and there's a couple different possibilities, and then it's a constant question throughout the first half of the season. Okay, so which one of these guys is actually a bad guy?
I
don't think that's a bad idea, but I do think that would be taking away from the character of Galadriel, because we know she's supposed to be, wise, and she's the one who's suspicious of Sauron. Not first, but after Gil-galad and Elrond originally rejected him from Lindon, she was the one who, was sort of the chief enemy, I think Tolkien says something like that, of Sauron. So yes, Elrond is suspicious of him, but probably less so than Gil-galad and Galadriel. He's younger, and I think he would be a really good candidate for a main character, but again, I feel like if he was like the main detective when it comes to Sauron, that would be taking away from Galadriel's, arc.
I don't know.
Especially if she does get usurped by Celebrimbor by the word of Sauron.
I mostly think Elrond will be like the statesman, like going over to a Region, trying to, fix things, trying to get Celebrimbor out of Annatar's side, that sort of thing,
Sure.
Just be the kind of the diplomat.
But even then, that's not. I feel like that's not really that important, at least for the first season, the only really important thing that happens is the Forging of the Rings.
We'll see. I don't know.
But I think that would be quite interesting though. Maybe at the same time, maybe the whole subject of Annatar, but maybe as Matt said, going into it, maybe thinking which one is Annatar's. Like spot the Annatar for the first season. That would be. I forgot someone said. I think it was Nikki said something around something similar to that. No, it was Spot the Elijah Wood, something like that. I think a while ago, but I was on the previous podcast. But so yeah, but Matt, with that thing, do you think it would get at a point where maybe get too suspicious? Where you have this guy, this very fair looking guy, is saying, "Have you ever seen any rings? Do you want to know about how to make a ring?" Something like that. Maybe just starting to say like, maybe this is the guy. Maybe this is the guy.
Yeah, and I mean there'll be stuff that's less of a mystery for those of us who know the lore in and out. But for casual fans, they'll be more not confused, but they'll be more in the dark than we will. We'll know Sauron, most likely. We'll know who Sauron is right off the bat. The rest of the world will be Googling Annatar, after people start calling him Annatar. So yeah, there'll definitely be some things like that. It's just kind of a fun theory at this point. I'm curious to see, like, I could see if they had a couple characters who are similar and, shot it in creative ways where they don't necessarily, call him by the name Annatar, or they have some other name that they call him, that's mysterious, and us nerds look it up in Elvish and discover it means something that could point us toward it being Sauron, and that's a total red herring, and it's actually this other guy. It's really hard to say at this point. It's all guesswork, but yeah, I'm curious to see how they pull it off.
Yeah, I actually like that. The last bit, maybe having these so many different characters. So maybe even for us, we don't know, and then maybe just a little special thing that we can, for like actual fans to look and say, maybe it is this guy. But yeah, maybe that is, and that's also an engaging way for Amazon to do that as well. So yeah, I think, and I'm sure that in this show as well, we are talking about the characters and places, but I'm sure Amazon, they've got this budget. Was it for 60 million, something like that? I'm sure we are going to see a battle scene. I was thinking the most underrated and underlooked thing about this show is the battle moment scenes, and just these, because we for sure Amazon are going to have to put some battles in at some point. I think the most memorable one is, I was thinking, the moment of the Battle of the Gothlo. I know, Chen, you think that is a series finale in itself. I was thinking that as well, about the fall of Eregion as well. So I was thinking, do you think that Amazon, I know, because one of the biggest not problems, I think people said about, and even Christopher Tolkien said, it's about the Lord of the Rings, it's something along the lines of it being an action movie for people.
It's an action movie. Yeah. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, not very bad thing. So I was thinking, maybe will this show inhibit the same thing in sense? I'm not saying like Legolas taking down a Mumakil or something on that level, but I have these epic like battle moments. For example, I think one of them was Celebrimbor on that banner as coming down. I was thinking the other thing is Numenor's like coming back at the Battle of the Gothlo, just coming up the river and just saving the day basically. And that's the interesting thing, Matt. The whole Battle of the Gothlo, how do you envision that happening? Not about the war of the elves and Sauron. Have you had much thought into how that would work on screen, and how many episodes it should be, how long we should look at it for, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that's definitely a season finale type event. Like I said, I could see that being the season 2 finale. If season 1 is the fall of Eregion, it makes sense that season 2 would be, maybe that's the season we look back and like, that's the war season that was like a war going on for an entire season kind of thing. And then obviously you've got, the Numenorians obviously are involved there. So that's kind of your first opportunity to see the Numenorians and elves coming together. I don't know what that would mean for season 1 of Numenor, because surely we'd see Numenor in season 1 in some form or fashion. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's putting off too much the Numenorians. Maybe Amazon will want to show off Numenor more than that in the entire first season. But yeah, whenever this battle ends up coming into play, I think look for that to be a big one, a season ender most likely, and maybe like a supersized extra long episode like TV series like to do.
Indeed. And I think there is probably, even if the story isn't the best maybe for these battles, or maybe the action scenes, while maybe the plot around is the best, we know that visually it's going to look amazing without a doubt. So at least Amazon have that on their side. And I was thinking another thing around Numenor is, and also Region and Lindenrath, I'll let Ken take over for me because I know he'd probably present it in a much better way, is that this aspect of, the books did have politics in the sense that, like you have court politics, this and that, not too much, but maybe in this show, will this be a change? Could we, more about court politics and how each kingdom interacts, etc.? But let Ken take this one away.
Yeah. I think this show, it has to be, partially because, the action-adventure type of premise, where a group of characters go on a journey from point one to another point, and there are set pieces along the way, that doesn't really work for television very much. And it's not what the Second Age is about. Either stories of the Second Age, the Calibeth or the Forging, are quest stories. They're not. They're both... Like, people will roll eyes when I say Game of Thrones, but you can also imagine them like some of the scenes in Gladiator, like Lucilla conspiring with the senators and with Maximus against Commodus, that sort of thing, where it's more about power struggles and characters kind of outmaneuvering one another, and I suppose somewhat like based on a lot of talking and councils and that sort of thing. And I like that sort of stuff. I love it in Gladiator. I love it in all those sorts of movies. And it's a very good premise, and it's very different, which is good. The difference is very, very good. And I did have another point. And yeah, of course, at some point, inevitably, all this stuff will culminate in a war story. It will develop into a war. Both stories do. All Tolkien stories do, actually. So it will also be... There will be room for pretty cool action set pieces, which is a good thing. Some of us really like action set pieces. So yeah, sure. It's different. It's going to be different. And it's possibly going to be different in a way that's very refreshing and new and interesting, Which is cool. I don't know, looking at the other big franchises, I don't know that any one of them is making that kind of switch, because most of the big franchises are founded on quest stories. And I don't know that any other of the big franchises is kind of doing the switch to something more Machiavellian, I suppose, more politics, not politics in the sense of contemporary politics, I mean. Just in the sense of like scheming and conspiracies and that sort of thing.
So Roman Senate, I'd say, is a good way, something like that.
Roman Senate, yeah, or the Scottish council scenes in Braveheart, or the court of King Boudoir in Kingdom of Heaven, that sort of thing.
Yeah, but I'm talking to you. Do you think that could work with Tolkien, though, having that? Because we know that he made there was a myth. He has a mythology as a legendarium so many years, but specifically in his Tolkien's works, it is mostly quests in a sense. So do you think that change could work on TV for Tolkien and having it in Tolkien's works? Do you think it would work correctly?
Like with the war councils, or
yeah, just like every day. For example, we got one scene we're in Linden's council. We've got other one who got Círdan. They've got they've received something from Numenor. And then
the best example. Yeah.
Oh wait.
The best example fellowship would be something that Tolkien Tube has mentioned just a while ago, which is Annatar convinces Celebrimbor to do a coup against Galadriel. That's as political as you get.
Yeah. And then I was
Yeah.
saying Baron as well. For example, Numenor sends in something to Linden. They got the council there. Do we notify Eregion? Do we tell them? Oh, Annatar's there. We don't really like him. Do we tell them? But then Eregion, Celebrimbor gets angry. So there's something like that. It just goes circles. This like backstabbing thing. Do you think it could work in Tolkien's works?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the way it is for the most part in the lore. It's a lot of, advice and counsel, and again, like you just said, Sauron sort of, in a way, corrupts Celebrimbor, not morally or anything, but he sort of hijacks him, and that's exactly what y'all are just talking about, sort of the war council thing, and elsewhere with the actual battles. I think it would make just as much sense, if not more, to sort of have that theme and style of, leaders and kings being advised by whoever.
Matt, do you think that it would work on screen like that? We're having all these different kingdoms interacting with each other in that sense.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a divide that comes up between, Numenor kind of turns their backs on the elves of Linden. There's definitely some room for some, kingdom-based drama for sure in this series.
And I was just thinking now, I think it's coming to my head when the moment you mentioned, like with Numenor just turning their backs on Middle-earth, we have the story of Aldarion and Erendis, and just around that, would you want to see that the story? Because I think Aldarion and Erendis is one of the most complete stories and character arcs in plot-wise in the Second Age. We got a full story of this character going of voyages there and back. Starts a little boy, then comes back as this king, takes it. He is against when you get sent a letter like 882 of the Second Age. From that, and he just gets this letter saying from Gil-galad saying, "Oh, there's the shadow rising in the east," and maybe this fits in perfectly with that synopsis for, that was confirmed by Amazon around that as well. I think another thing that other co-host Penguin says maybe have Aldarion and Erendis, but this is, I know, timeline wise, maybe this is the only real way I can see timeline wise we start mixing it up a bit and maybe push Aldarion and Erendis up a bit. Do you think that could work? But do we like to see their involvement as well?
Yeah, I could see Aldarion and Erendis being characters. I don't know how deep they'll go into their story. I don't know. Maybe that's a story that's happening. While if they're tweaking the timeline, maybe that's something that's going on while Sauron's, doing his stuff over in Eregion. And that's how they kind of have stuff happening in Numenor, and don't totally leave out Numenor in the first season. It's hard to say. Like it's kind of an interesting story. I don't know if it necessarily fits with what else is going on, tone-wise and everything with what everything else that we'll be seeing, but it'd be interesting for sure to see them try to work that in.
That's the only problem. It is too detached from everything else, really, in the sense that he's going on his own. I think, unless you want to correct me, I think Aldarion and Galadriel do meet. Is that true? I remember reading that.
They do.
Yeah. There we go. Finally, my lore work has come up. I remember them. Maybe you can make something out of that, but as Matt, you rightly said, it's quite hard to actually. It's quite detached in that sense. That is too far. But yeah, unless you have anything else to add. I thought you would.
No, I'll concede the floor to others.
yeah. So talk to you. I know you wanted to say something.
All right, so for everyone who doesn't frequently watch Fellowship of Fans' Second Age show, there have been like 5 leaks, I think, that came out about the show.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in here?
Sure.
Okay, I understand that people start saying, like denying some rumors saying, oh, oh, what happens if it's one of the fake sets? And I've seen this just a little crop up someplace a little bit, and I like to say that you really think Amazon are going to build a village for 6 months and then say no? Yeah, I see people saying, oh, this village set must be fake then. Like, they've built this for 6 months, probably cost in the upwards millions of pounds, and they just did it so Fellowship of Fans on Twitter couldn't see and that they have a village in the Camus Studios. It's like, just things like that. And also, like, for example, like, one of the leaks was, and I'm jumping ahead a bit, like, Anthony Crumb joins the army. I was like, oh no, that's fake. It's like, at the end of the day, who are they fooling? They're just wasting time themselves. Does anyone, like, is that, if you get what I mean, talk to you, like, that, like, people just start dismissing it, like, over the fact that, oh, they're fake sets.
Yeah.
And I like to say as well that from the stuff I have released, I don't know how to phrase it correctly, but from the stuff I released and the things I've been able to get confirmed by Amazon later on, of course, with their releases, you'd have to know people in pretty high up places in order to, and I'm sure they would probably know what is real and what is fake. That's what I'd say on that. But yeah, before you continue, I was going to mention this on my show anyways, but yeah.
And I'd say,
side. Yeah.
You know, with these leaks, I'd imagine that you've got someone watching this scene being filmed with extras on set. They've said that there were extras on set, so they're not going to hire hundreds of people to film and act, and then, I mean, they might cut it out, but they wouldn't do all that for just a fake scene. Yeah, the budget's huge, but I mean, that's a huge money waste.
Yeah.
So the leaks are as follows. If anyone wants to say anything, now is your chance, because it's pretty long.
Go for it.
All right, so a dwarven king escapes a collapsing mineshaft by the skin of his teeth. A character played by Anthony Crumb tries to join the Numenorian army. A Numenorian queen's throne room is seen in the probably later episodes. And a Numenorian town square is also seen probably beginning around mid-season. Those are all the leaks that you released, I think, in the first and second age show.
Yeah.
And then in the most recent and third, you also said, or your leak said, there are different guilds in Numenor, like the Blacksmith's Guild, Fisherman's Guild, Breadmaker's Guild, Builder's Guild, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
each guild has its own different insignias, and most of the extras on set belong to one of the guilds. Each of them has a guild seal somewhere on their costume, sometimes on the belt, sometimes on the shoulder. Looks like a small golden coin, but with their guild insignia. If you are a Blacksmith Guild extra, your guild insignia is a hammer and tog inside of a burst of flame. When the army is marching outside of the town square, you will see a Numenorian general wearing his armor. It's a gold chest piece with all the guild seals represented on the front of his armor. And those are all of the leaks.
Yeah.
Just put it in chat.
Yeah. And I think, and adding, before this comes out, I believe the next one will be out where we have this village. I think it's probably maybe a Guathudum village or something, and these orcs come and keep on raiding this village, and then in the end, apparently the village leader gives up the village or something like that. So that's the latest leak that's come out a week before as well, and you're hearing this all a week before. So, yeah, that's not. So first of all, I thought Guathudum or something along those lines, maybe, and then apparently interesting that it's orcs. Yeah. It was orcs raiding the village, and the village leader actually gives up. And yeah.
So, something I found really interesting with all these leaks is that, except for the first one, you know, the one with a dwarven king escaping the mine shaft that's collapsing, they all have to do with Numenor, which is a little bit interesting because this is all presumably for season 1. Yes, season 1 and 2 are filming in SAG, so they're like back to back, and because they're potentially filming by location rather than, you know, by episode, some of this could be for season 2 according to what you've released, Fellowship. But we don't really know. I'm a little bit confused with all this personally, but chances are most of this is for season 1. Especially because, you know, you've got to prioritize the season that's, you know, coming out in a few months rather than the season that's going to be coming out in like a few years.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting that Numenor is going to be focused on so heavily in the first or maybe second seasons.
Yeah.
Because, you know, not much happens with Numenor until like the Battle of the Gwath, though. And yeah, there's Aldarion and Erendis, but we already discussed that. That's a little bit disconnected from anything important.
Yeah, and I think just to balance that out at the same time is maybe because I can admit that a lot of the more stuff I know that has come from the Numenor set, so a lot of the primary stuff is and all that stuff is come from that area. But another just interesting thing about that I think people didn't really understand when I initially released it is that Amazon, what they do is they film in locations. So they are filming locations, then they come back to set for a bit, and so this is where the season 1, season 2 back-to-back thing comes in. For example, they've gone down. No, where are the chilly mountains in New Zealand? The cold ones, snowy. Do you know roundabouts where?
What is it? Southern Alps?
Yes, somewhere. So let's say South New Zealand. They're going somewhere. They're helicopter there for a few weeks, and they're doing scenes there for artAlais, for example. They're going there. artAlais is in by August 2020. The scripts were made for the show and for season 2 of the show. And then artAlais, what Amazon are doing is that season 1's here. Oh, the same characters in season 2. We already got the scenes here, and they are filming here as well. So why not just film some season 2 scenes at the same time here? We have the characters here instead of maybe next year in 2022 or somewhere to late 2021, getting more back again, having to film, recreate all these massive the setups and everything just to film 10 minutes of dialogue or whatever at this location. Why not just get the season 2 filming done now? And that's what it means by Talk to Riley mentioned is they're filming it by just by location as well, and that's where the season 2 back-to-back filming came from. And
that's what you do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that Amazon are being smart in this way by taking this approach?
That's what you do in productions of this kind. Like a great example, like if you were like in the Lord of the Rings, they would shoot all the scenes that they needed out of a specific location, especially if it was hard to get there. And they get them done with, and then they'll proceed to something else. You don't shoot movies and TV shows by the order of the scenes. You almost never do that. A good example, actually, I think the final scene of the third Star Wars prequel was originally shot during the time of the second prequel because they were already in Tunisia. They were like, oh well, we won't bother coming back here, of course, so we might as well shoot this now. Eventually, I think they did reshot it, but nevertheless, they did shoot a version of it. So yeah, that's what you do. It's entirely logical.
Yeah.
Completely.
So, from these insights, Matt, it does seem that Amazon, filming-wise and production-wise, they are being quite effective. They're being quite resourceful. They are getting it done, aren't they, Matt?
Yeah, from everything we've heard. It's not like you said, Ken said, that's the most efficient way, how these productions operate is to make use of sets. I mean, if you think of Peter Jackson's films, I think it was like the second scene that they shot was the Grey Havens, which you don't see till the end of Return
quite
of the King,
early,
obviously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking, that shows how, and another benefit of that is an earlier season 2 as well that we could get from this. So yeah, I think just interestingly, I think we have maybe covered a lot of this in this overview of it. I know we've gone more into some story leaks as well, but another thing around this overview of the show is that as of right now, what do you guys think, just for an average person, is a public perception of this show? So, for example, Matt, you just see someone average, they're coming to look at Lord of the Rings on Prime, and they've heard about it, maybe they've seen one little thing or whatever about it. What do you think the public perception is right now of this show?
It's hard for me to say because I'm so immersed in Middle Earth that I'm, hanging on the edge of my seat for every little news and rumor about it. I think your average person who probably likes the Lord of the Rings films, or maybe even loves the films, but has probably read The Hobbit, maybe Lord of the Rings, maybe not. Definitely hasn't read The Silmarillion. The more casual fans probably don't know or expect much of anything. They've probably seen a few news stories here and there of the more big scale rumors that have circulated over the past months, and they vaguely know that a show is being made.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think until they start actually releasing images and trailers and stuff like that, it's going to be pretty quiet aside from like a rumor trending on Twitter or something. It's really when that promotion cycle kicks in is when it has the capacity to totally take over. Like not many movies or TV shows have the built-in ability to do so. But with the history of the books combined with the Peter Jackson films and the huge success there, I feel like if this show is good, it has the chance to take over pop culture like like any huge monumental show. I'm not a Game of Thrones person myself, but I'll acknowledge that definitely took over for a while. And yeah, I think this has insane potential to just take over the entertainment world.
Yeah.
I'd add that I think there's also a large portion of people who think the show's doomed. Especially with being political. I think a lot of that's because, bigger YouTubers, as well as mostly just articles and news sources like that, having a rather gloomy article gets a lot more clicks, It gives you a better headline and better content, I guess. Well, better with air quotes. So I think a lot of people also do think that the show's screwed, essentially.
Yeah, and I think in the last few months, a lot of the thing that's come out of it, even from that I've forgotten the name of that, the person who played the Mulan, saying, "Hey, there's not many I think was it. I don't want to get this wrong. I think it's like Koreans, Japanese, Chinese, one of the Asian.
Oh yeah.
People got that coming out as well, and then you've got then Jennifer Sorke coming on backing up, and then of course everything online between all these things of both sides of maybe political beliefs, and then just getting up, and maybe that's the attraction of that's the problem with being so quiet. People become restless, and these negative things do start to build up. Yeah, hey, maybe it is the Lord of the Rings brand. Maybe we can stay quiet for a long time, but in a while, maybe...
I'd really disagree with that, though. I think because the show is so quiet and their PR cycle hasn't started, and not that many people really know about the show, that keeps them from looking up stuff about the show and, having that gloomy opinion. Because if not many people are interested in the show, then you can't have that many people who hate the show before it comes out.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you have a lot of, for example, I just see a lot of new people coming in like message boards, places, just saying, "Oh yeah, that show's going to be woke, or that show's going to is going to be this about their the political beliefs both ways," and that's just their first impression of it, and I think that's a problem. But I think that's a discussion for another time around that. But
and I think, if I may say one last thing, that's not really going to affect Amazon as long as that group of people isn't too big. They've just got to have enough hype when they release a trailer, when they start the PR cycle, that those people are either like, you know what, I don't really care. I'm just going to watch the first episode and see if I like it or not, which I feel like the vast majority of people, even the people saying they're not going to even try it now, they're going to change their minds once they see a trailer or something. Granted, there will be those who won't even watch the trailer, which I think is a little bit ignorant, but yeah, I think the majority of people will give it a fair shot.
I will say, people know that this show is a thing. Like, I've been talking casually, like, to people, and I don't tend to bring Lord of the Rings up in discussions. I'm not in my ordinary life with ordinary people. But anyway, like, it came up conversations with people like in university, and if people like average blokes in a university in a Middle Eastern country know about the concept of this show, then it's in a good place in terms of getting its name out there in a way. And certainly that owes entirely to the fact that it is the Lord of the Rings.
Definitely.
But yeah, that inspired. I remember that conversation inspired a huge confidence in me regarding the the show's prospects, shall we say, in terms of certainly commercial success, because people do know that it's a thing, at least. No.
In my experience, the people outside of like the online community, which I'm involved with, the Lord of the Rings community, not that many people really know about it, but that could just be me.
But that's just about it for today's podcast. It's been a really interesting discussion. First of all, thank you, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Indeed, and it has been fun. And of course, all his links and YouTube, Twitter will all be in the description below. Of course, one of the biggest, of course, this maybe number one. Not we won't go into that. Let's just say one of the biggest YouTube talking YouTubers out there right now. That Dan is doing the Lord's work, indeed, and we also have another YouTuber who will one day be there talking to you. Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, it's great to be here, and it was great talking to y'all. Chin, Fellowship, Matt.
Indeed. And finally, we have Chen. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's always fun.
And but until the next one, my friends, goodbye.